Are you with me, Dan?
I'm with you. I'm with you, Joe.
Awesome, awesome. Hey, since we don't have Spartans to cheer for this weekend, I guess we do. We definitely have Easter, but I thought maybe I'd fire a few questions to you or at you about the bean market that we could share with growers in here in Michigan. And I don't even know if you miss Michigan anymore. You're like our best export when we
No,
sing it
I
at
I
California.
I love Michigan. Michigan's near and dear to my heart. Having lived there most of my life, of course, and having graduated from Michigan State, I'm a huge Spartan. So, yeah, I love Michigan as well.
So
So
it's home. It's kind of home for you, right?
it's
How
still
many
it's, it's still home.
how many years in the bean business, Dan?
Well, I'll tell you, that's kind of cool that you asked me because this fall will be my 50th harvest.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
50 harvests. I'm a
I-
ways behind you, but not as
yeah.
far as
I,
one would think.
go ahead. Go ahead.
50 years?
Yeah, I started in '76 with Northern States Bean Company in Lansing, Michigan, Jim Todd. Yeah.
Wow. Well, we've got
Yeah.
the right guy. We've got the right guy here because he's got a lot of history behind him. And so Dan, I thought we'd just talk a little bit about current crop to begin with.
Hmm.
Um, I sort of am an outsider looking in at the market these days, but it feels like or it sounds like there's a little bit of strength in some of the current crop classes, and you know that I usually think like a black bean guy, but I'm always watching pinos and just
Sure.
can you just tell us a little bit about what's happening there? And don't forget we've got a few kidney beans in Michigan too.
Yeah, well, in general, I basically think what's going on is because the trade has been concerned about what's going to happen in '26 crop in terms of acreage reduction expectation. Um, the current crop market was started to move up a little bit, and it's gaining some strength. And when the market tends to strengthen up a little bit, growers tend to pull back from selling and prefer to kind of watch things for a while, which they've been doing. And consequently, even though we're facing a rather significant carryover prospect, a lot those there aren't very many beans coming to the market, and when the market isn't being fed by growers selling, then it tends to strengthen. Um,
Yeah.
the offset to that is that we do have a carryover that we have to be concerned about, and buyers have a lot of coverage already for the rest of the 25 crop year. And they can afford to just sort of sit back and kind of watch things unless they need physicals. If you need the physicals, then you're going to have to go into the market now and pay the price that reflects what growers will sell for. And it's higher than it has been. And so the strength is related to that fact. And of course, what's happened since the early part of February, and I mentioned this in my most recent crop report, is that when they came out with the crop expectations based on the FSA surveys that were taken back in early February, of course, it was pre-war. It was back in the day when oil prices were in the low 60s, and now oil prices are near 112, 115, whatever. Anyway, they're sky high. Everything's super expensive. The whole market has changed in terms of psychology, and it's mostly psychology driven right now. It's not necessarily trading driven, but
Yeah.
it's psychology driven.
Yeah. I keep track of grower sales and as measured against the assessment that's been paid to the Bean Commission.
Hmm.
So I'm gonna say that Michigan today is more than slightly more than 90% bought in from the grower. We don't have a lot of grower beans left to buy here in Michigan. When I talked to my counterpart Mitch in the Mindac region, at least we talked a couple weeks ago, and he sounds like he's less than 50% bought in out there. So those growers that are holding beans out there are the beneficiaries, if you will. But I think you touched on it. There's a little caution you'd throw out there against holding too long. Um, as measured against this carryover that's staring at us, particularly in pinos and blacks.
Yeah, in particular, those two categories are the ones that have basically a stock to use ratio that's just, not
With a lot of whack.
not very, yeah, it's out of whack. It's not very good.
Yeah. So
So,
Dan, shift
yeah,
towards new crop now, and we get we've been hearing all winter that seed sales are slow. Some of the big guys that I've talked to are talking about their seed sales being 40 or 50% down. In one case, a guy told me 60% last week. Um, then the report comes out and kind of surprises me when it's only got Michigan down 10%. It's got North Dakota down, I've got it here on the screen, but I think it's down
well,
12%.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so that doesn't really jive with what I was expecting to see. Were you surprised?
No, again, it's all because the survey was done early February, and then the grain markets, of course, have gone up dramatically since then. The
Yeah.
whole everybody's perspective on what they thought it's all that's a survey based on intention, not in not
Yeah.
not a survey based on actual planted acres. So it's always the June report. Excuse me, the March report is always a dart throw. And
Yeah.
and so you take these, and our report is always based on USDA numbers until FSA numbers come out. Well, the FSA numbers won't come out until this
Yes.
plant is planted.
Yeah.
So hopefully in June, we'll be able to give the trade a more accurate assessment of what actually was planted versus what was expected back in early February. So yeah, I've heard the same thing. Everybody, the popular phrase is our seed sales are anemic, and and
Yeah.
and it's I mean it's really and there and it but it really ranges depending on who you talk to and where they are, where their elevator's located, and so forth and so on. So it's not and nothing is cast in stone at this point in time, but and I've seen this happen so often where where the dealers are really, really concerned based on certified seed sales that the acres are going to be, horrific. And then all of a sudden, June comes around and instead of being, down, 25 or 30%, we're down only 5 or 10% or whatever. So in years past, that's kind of typically what happens. But this year feels different to me because of what's going on, relative to oil prices. It just doesn't feel like things are going to, be settled anytime soon, and we're going to be faced with higher prices for grain, for whether it's corn or soybeans. Just options that growers have, whether it's canola, soybeans, or corn, that's going to dig into our dry bean acres and unless somebody comes along and says, okay, I'm really worried about the acreage being down dramatically, so I'm going to go in and I'm going to buy some acres. And I just don't know who's going to do that when you look at the carryover prospect, especially on pinos and blacks. So,
Yeah.
and based on the carryovers, we needed to have an acreage cutback. It's all great if it's 20%, 15, 20, even maybe as high as 25%. I mean, if you look
Yeah.
at the numbers, we can afford to have a cutback like that. But anything over that, it's going to be a little scary, especially when you consider weather sensitivity and
Yeah.
get into like a 30 or 40% acreage cutback plus
Yep.
the weather problem. Then Lord only knows
Risky.
what's going to happen. Here we go again.
Risky.
Yeah.
Dan, if you don't mind, I've got your dark red kidney projection on the screen. I think the consensus is that we are probably going to pick up a few acres of dark reds. Are you worried that we're gaining too many acres of dark reds?
Yeah, it looks that way, doesn't it? I looked at that, and
Um,
cranberries are another one. The
yeah.
the and again, these are dart throws. Um, I again, I have to go back, for instance, in whether it's Minnesota or North Dakota or Michigan, whatever it is. In the case of Michigan, for instance, if we're dealing with a certain amount of acres based on what the government, is expecting, and in Michigan it went from 250 down to 225. of that 225, what are crayons, what are darks, what are pinos, what are northerns, what are all the
Yeah.
miscellaneous, and then you sort of get down into navies and blacks, and you sort of back into the blacks.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
And I think we've done
so
it that way for a lot of years, haven't we?
yeah, that's
Um,
kind of what you do, and that's what I did here. So these, yeah, the kidneys, it's a specialty crop, just like all these beans. It's not something that's traded in Chicago. It's not
right.
something that you can hedge. There's a finite demand for kidneys. There's really a finite demand for all these beans. There's not very much elasticity in any of these crops. And that's the
You
big problem because when you all of a sudden decide, oh, I'm going to plant these, even though you might not have a contract, but you plant them just because you're going to spec the acreage,
you need
hoping
a home.
hoping to hit a home run. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, everybody's going, what are we going to do with all these kidneys, or what are we
Yeah.
going to do with all these crayons? And so, yeah, that's it. I don't. That's just those kidney numbers are a little scary right now.
Well, I look at them and, we've gone for 3 or 4 years with zeros across the bottom of your worksheet, right?
Yeah.
In darks and lights and crayons. And this year we've got some numbers in there. Um, Northerns still look like they could be sort of a 1-to-1 ratio, supply and demand. So that one doesn't look too bad.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk about navies for a second. I think we're going to be up a little bit in Michigan, but pretty controlled acreage, pretty managed, and we need we need at least an average crop across the board, don't we?
We really do. I mean, the Navy, the navies, I know how important navies are. At least they used to be in Michigan.
Yeah,
And Navy consumption, has really dropped off dramatically over the years, and we just don't need the Navy acres that we used to. And the other thing about navies that's difficult about navies is that you have a fairly significant percentage that is marketed to, from companies with major consumers like Heinz, Princess, Bush Brothers, the bigger players that dominate
sure.
the Navy consumption. So there's not a lot of liquidity for outside players and navies per se.
Yeah,
So that's why there's not nearly as many Navy guys left anymore as there used to be, because there used to be so many more. The demand side
yeah.
is so consolidated. It's just it's just not really a real exciting market to be involved in. But
You and
we do
I,
but we do need navies.
yeah.
And but you
You
can see that it's not doesn't navies doesn't seem to follow the volatile pattern of a pin or a black.
you and I could write a book on the demise of Navy acres
Yeah, I
in
know.
Michigan, couldn't we?
Sad.
So let's skip over blacks for a minute and go to pinos. And I've guys that know me have heard me say you can't. I don't think you can have a strong black market if you have a really sloppy, weak pinot market. It's not like there's a chain between them, but there's a bit of a rubber band in between them, I think. And so I'm looking at this, and we're gonna have a supply of 15 million bags. Just using that as an example on your worksheet against 12 and a
Mhm.
half million of demand, looks like a 2.5 million bag carryout. We don't we don't know what the acreage is actually going to be. There's some component of what do they call it, bin run seed or brown bag seed out in the
Yeah,
Dakota area. So
that's the
so
key.
that one looks a little bit interesting to me. But so now we roll into blacks. And by the way, I kind of skipped over small reds, but I think we're going to be fairly steady in small reds. I hope we don't overdo that one.
That's
Um,
that's been an interesting market though, because small reds, I mean, we've been growing,
uh,
several years. We've been keep growing that acreage, and yet we keep selling them. I mean, the
the,
market's been phenomenal for those, which is
probably
amazing.
the
I
most
never really,
positive story we've got,
yeah,
isn't it?
it's a really good one. Yeah, but anyway,
Yeah.
back to blacks.
So I get to blacks, and I admittedly have been a little bit bearish, maybe some would say a lot bearish on blacks because I was worried about this carryover as a
Hmm.
black cloud hanging over our head. And um I look at where I think we are, where I think the market is trading and acting, and I think you're spot on with your assessment earlier. Um but I always look at your sheet, and one of the first lines I go to is that demand line, and I think there's some data out there that suggests we continue to grow black bean consumption at a pretty good clip.
Mhm.
Also a success story. Um, but I don't. I think we could debate whether or not consumption will be 8 million hundredweights. And the problem with that is if it's only 7 million hundredweights, look what our carryover does, right?
I know, I
God
know.
dang, that's not good. But um you and I could be, we haven't even talked about it, but I still think there's some opportunity for the US to put some black beans into Venezuela, maybe Cuba.
Yeah,
Um, but we're
yeah.
right, we're just sitting here with our fingers crossed that that happens. There's nothing for certain yet there. Um,
Hmm.
so when you look at 2 million out of 8 million carryover, we've got 25% of next year's crop under cover.
Right, right.
That's worse than the Pinto story.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's about the same. It's pretty close to the same. I mean, it's like close to a third of what we're going to need already in the bin. And
Yeah.
and and really oh yes, domestic demand has been really good and is apparently growing, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's one of the few categories that is seeing significant growth. And it's hard to get real numbers on that. And I've
Yeah.
I've always used between 5 and 5.5 million for domestic consumption. And the question for blacks is, what are we going to export? Because so goes export, really so goes the black market.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. Fair enough.
and Mexico will typically use around on the low end, probably 1.5 million, but more often than not, it's between 1.8 and 2 million. And then you've got others using about 500,000, like the Dominican Republic and Costa Rica. So you're basically using in a typical year, 2.5 million bags export, and let's say 5.5, and that's how I come up for domestic, and then that's how
All
I come
right.
up with the 8 million. And then as far as carryovers, the carryovers are pretty much determined ultimately by the stocks on hand report that we get out of Michigan at the end of August and what we get out of North Dakota at the end of December. And I understand that they're working on trying to get Minnesota involved in that stock report as well. Hopefully, by the end of July report that comes out of the Dakotas, we'll have Minnesota join in that too, which would be great because I really think that that's really important information for the industry, to get a feel for what our carryovers are. It helps growers, it helps dealers, it helps everybody have a better clue as to what to
Yeah.
plant and how to market, and I think that's all really good. But yeah, but Mexico, if Mexico has a really bad crop, they can come in and they can, like they did 2 years ago, and they can buy 3.5 million bags of blacks
Yeah.
themselves.
Surprise us.
It's shocking, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
that can be a huge swing for blacks. Hopefully, Cuba and Venezuela comes through. Maybe the USDA will, put together some food aid where we get some of this carryover taken care of in both blacks and punos. I know that there's a tender out now, and there's people are suggesting to me that there's going to be more tenders down the road, which is fantastic because we need them, even in light of the fact that right now it's not easy to get offers from people, which
Yeah, for
which,
sure.
which
For
is the
sure.
which is the irony. We've got
Yeah,
this,
it's crazy.
where are the offers?
Yeah.
So it's but under the circumstances, you can understand why people are reticent about offering anything, because growers aren't wanting to sell anything because they think the market's going up. Dealers
Yeah.
don't want to sell anything because they don't want to sell anything unless they know what it's going to cost them from the grower level. So
Right.
we're kind of in this really weird spot as an industry. We need the government to take care of some of this overproduction. On the other hand, and then we also need the growers to feed it. So
It,
it's a
it,
conundrum.
in my days, I can't remember ever seeing this sort of play out exactly like this, right? we've had times where you and I could actually debate, do I want to be long or short the market based on this level? Um, Not too many guys want to short the market when you're talking about grower prices down in the 20s. That
Right.
doesn't feel right. You know, if we had grower prices in the mid 30s, I think guys would be willing to say, yeah, I want to own them or I want to sell them. Like the old days, right? When we were doing a lot of that. But today we're kind of in no man's land. We're going to have to boost these prices to get growers involved, but at the same time, got to have a place to go with them too. So,
Yeah, there's a limit to the upside because of the carryover, and there's a limit to the downside because you don't want the growers to be upset to the point where they just don't grow them.
right,
So
right,
it's finding it. The market is always struggling to find that sweet spot, and
yeah.
that's where we are right now, is trying to find the sweet spot.
Dan, it's hard to believe. There's probably going to be some people that see this video that don't exactly know what DW Sturt and Company does. Just tell us a little bit about your company and what
Oh.
you do.
Well, as I mentioned, this is going to be my 50th harvest. I started out in '76 as a trader, um,
At
and
6 years old.
at work. Yeah, right. I wish work is working for, and then I went from one. I worked for several company, three or four companies for 7 years, and then in 8 years, and then in 1984, I decided to start my own brokerage, and I've been doing that ever since. And what I do is I talk to the elevators and the various dealers, and back in the day there used to be not only dealers and a fair amount of them, and based on the elevator count, but dealers, and we also had traders, and
Yeah,
there were a lot of traders back in those days too. And of course, those guys are all gone now, and now we're really focusing on helping dealers market their beans. And that's what I do. I help dealers market their beans, both into the domestic market as well as international. And our primary focus right now from an international standpoint is Mexico, because Mexico is the most important factor in terms of pinot and black consumption, and
yeah,
we mostly focus on those two varieties, but we do all these beans, and that's why I send out this report. And this report started back in the '90s when I would put this report together and call on various consumer buyers, and I would take this report with me and I would show them this, and they loved it, and it helped them figure out
sure,
whether it was a good time to buy or not. And
sure.
and then it sort of took on a life of its own, and now I provide it to anybody that's interested in the industry, and anybody that's out there um, listening right now. You can just go to DW Sturt website, and you can get the information in terms of how to get this report. And I'd be happy to include anybody out there that wants to have it. I'll be happy to send it to them.
Dan, I need to say thank you on behalf of the whole industry for you putting this together. I've said this to you before. I think you're one of the few guys that puts numbers together, and the fun part about it is we don't have to agree or disagree with you, right? We can talk behind your back about how
Oh, I'm
wrong
sure.
you are.
I'm sure most people do.
Spend hours, right? We spend hours beating you up, but
That's
I
right.
I I'm just gonna tell you that having this tool is a piece of everybody's decision making, and it gets talked about it a lot. So on behalf of the whole industry, thank you for doing that since, what'd you say, since 1994?
In 90 in the night. No, I started in '84, but I started doing
84.
it in the mid '90s. I can't
Yeah.
remember the exact year that I started doing it, but it was in the mid '90s. And
I probably still could find every one of them
you
in my
hopefully you can. I
in
hope you
my
can.
files.
But
Dan,
one second before you close,
yeah, yeah,
um, what I love about this report personally is the fact that it doesn't have to be exactly correct, because
right.
it's nothing. This is not an exact science, but what it does is it tends to give a tendency, and it gives
Yes,
people an idea as to where we're at, where are we tending to go? Are we tending to go up? Are we tending to go
yeah.
down? What's the
Yeah.
tendency here? And it gives people an idea, well, hey, I think I might have to act and do something here, or maybe I'm just going to sit back and relax. So
I like the conversations we get into where we say, well, Stewart says there's not going to be any light red kidney beans, and I know there's going to be 76,000. Like,
yeah, yeah.
really, we're that far off, right? We're splitting
Exactly.
hairs. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Dan, I appreciate you doing this and making time for us on Good
Sure.
Friday. Thanks for doing that. I'm
Oh,
glad you got an IT department to help you.
yes, yes. Thank
Yeah,
goodness
tell her,
for Phyllis and Morgan. Yeah, they're very
yeah,
helpful.
tell them I said thank you and
Yeah.
have a great Easter and go green.
You too. You too. Love the Spartans. Take care.
See you, Dan. Thank
All
you.
right. We'll see you later. Okay, bye.